Right. The Middle East war has just entered a phase that should alarm anyone who drives a car, heats their home, or understands what happens when global energy infrastructure comes under sustained attack. Attacks on Middle East gas facilities have led to further spikes in energy prices, with the global oil benchmark hitting $115 a barrel after Israeli strikes sparked Iranian retaliation on energy infrastructure in Qatar and across the region. And here is what makes this particularly dangerous. An American F-35 fighter jet was struck by what is believed to be Iranian fire and made an emergency landing at a US airbase in the Middle East. The pilot is in stable condition, but this would be the first time Iran has hit a US aircraft in this war. Meanwhile, an Iranian ballistic missile struck the Haifa oil refinery complex in northern Israel on Thursday, one of Israel's largest energy companies. Emergency teams are fighting fires and checking for hazardous materials. The US is signaling it may unsanction some Iranian oil and release more from strategic reserves to combat soaring prices. And US intelligence chief Tulsi Gabbard told lawmakers that Iran be tainted, while revealing the tempting Israeli war objectives. Let's start with the energy crisis, because oil at $115 a barrel is devastating for the global economy. That is up from $103 just days ago. The benchmark has surged due to Israeli strikes on Iranian energy facility across the Middle East, which were spark at Iranian retaliation on energy infrastructure and across the Middle East. Qatar, a country that tried to maintain neutral positioning, now having its energy facilities attacked by Iran in retaliation for Israeli strikes on Iranian facilities. This is the regionalization of energy infrastructure warfare that experts feared. When one side strikes the other's oil and gas production, the response is strikes on neighboring countries' energy fab. That creates a cascade of disruptions, price spikes, and economic chaos. The US is now considering extraordinary measures to combat these price increases. They may transmute Iranian oil essentially allowing Iran to sell oil internationally, again, despite sanctions to increase global supply. Think about the absurdity of that for a moment. America is at war with Iran. American and Israeli forces are bombing Iranian energy facilities, killing Iranian officials, trying to overthrow the regime. And simultaneously, America may lift oil sanctions on Iran to prevent gasoline prices from bankrupting American consumers. That is how desperate the energy situation has become. The US may also release more oil from its strategic petroleum reserve. But as we've discussed before, that is a temporary measure with limits. You can only drain reserves so many times before they're depleted, and you have no emergency buffer left. And if this war continues for months, if energy infrastructure keeps being attacked across the region, those reserves won't be enough. Now let's talk about the F-35 incident, because it represents a significant escalation. A US F-35 fighter jet made an emergency landing at a US air base in the Middle East after being struck by what is believed to be Iran fire. Sam Hawkins, spokesman for US Central Command, said the fifth-generation C was Faklavation over Iran when it was forced to make the emergency. The aircraft landed safely. The pilot is in stable condition. The incident is under investigation. This would be the first time Iran has hit a US aircraft in the war started in late February. Both the US and Israel fly F-35 in this conflict. The aircraft costs of $100 million. So Iran has now demonstrated the capability to hit America's most advanced stealth fighter during combat operation. That is significant militarily. It shows Iranian air defenses, despite being heavily degraded, can still track and engage fifth generation. And it raises the stakes considerably if American pilots start getting shot down. If Israel losses more domestic political pressure on Haifa to either collate massive late massy or withdraw. And here is the contradiction. This emergency landing comes as CATASTROPHIC and continue widespread success. Defense Secretary Hegseth said Thursday morning the US is winning decisively. Levenses have been flattened, yet an F-35 was just hit by Iranian fire and forced to make emergency landing. If air defenses are flattened, how are they hitting American stealth fighters? Either Hegseth's exaggerating success or Iranian capabilities are more resilient than Faknodeh. Meanwhile, an Iranian ballistic missile struck the Haifa oil refinery complex in North Israel on Thursday. 3 Israeli sources confirmed this to CNN. The Bayzan Group oil refineries are one of Israel's largest energy companies, operating the main refinery facility for production in the Haifa Basin. Emergency teams were dispatched to assess damage, no injuries reported. Israel's fire and rescue authority said crews are conducting searches, working to extinguish fire and checking for suspected hazardous materials incidents. So Iran is now successfully striking Israeli energy infrastructure, not just military targets, not just government facilities, oil refineries, the infrastructure that processes fuel for Israelis and military. If Iran can keep hitting these facilities, if they can degrade Israel's refining capacity, Israel faces fuel shortages regardless of how much crude oil they can import. And then there is Tulsi Gabbard's testimony to lawmakers, which revealed some deeply troubling information. As U.S. Director of National Intelligence, Gabbard told Congress that Iran maintained the intention to rebuild Emritcham. Despite all the bombing, despite the leadership assassinations, despite the systematic destruction of military infrastructure, Iran still intends to pursue continue to power. That suggests this entire war may not achieve its stated objective of permanently preventing Iranian nuclear development. But perhaps even more significant, Gabbard said the objectives laid out by the US and Israeli governments for the war are different. America's closest ally in this conflict. The country we're coordinating strikes with with each in-higher intelligence. With has different war objectives than we do. What are those differences? Israel seeking complete regime change while America wants something less. Is America willing to negotiated setnipana while Israel wants? We don't know. But having different objectives in the middle of a war is a recipe for strategic confusion, conflicting priorities and potential disaster. And finally, sources told CNN that the US was aware of Israel's plan to strike the South Pass gas in Oivern, the world's largest despite presidents. Trump claimed he didn't know Israel would hit that target. That sources say the US was aware. So either Trump is lying about American knowledge of the strike, or he genuinely wasn't informed by his own military and intelligence apparatus about a major operation hitting the world's largest gas fields. Neither option is reassuring. Here is the bottom line. Global oil hit $115 a barrel after Israeli strikes sparked Iranian retaliation on energy infrastructure across the Middle East. A USF -35 was hit by suspected Iranian fire and made emergency landing. This time Iran has struck KSA war. An Iranian missile hit the Haifa oil refinery in northern Israel, sparking fires. The US may unsanction Iranian oil and release more reserves to combat prices. Intelligence Chief Gabbard says Iran still intends to rebuild nuclear enrichment and that US-Israeli war objectives. And sources say the US knew about the South Pass strike, despite Trump's otherwise. We have energy infrastructure warfare spreading across the region. Oil at $115 devastating consumers worldwide. Iran hitting American stealth fighters and Israeli refineries. The US considering lifting sanctions on a country we're actively bombing. Conflicting war objectives between America and Israel. And persistent questions about who knew what regarding strikes on the world's largest gas field. This is strategic incoherence meeting economic catastrophe meeting military elation. And there is no end in sight. This has been the royal truth. I'll see you next time.